Thank you. I will keep my comments brief, both to keep us on track with respect to time and also to not cause any delay in allowing us to begin the reception. I think this room is perhaps not, I don't feel guilty about that. This is not a room where people are profoundly food insecure, so I think we can withhold on that. So I only feel vaguely guilty about it, as people's stomachs may be grumbling. Before beginning, I would like to place my comments in context, and actually two contexts. First, like other presentations, my comments are situated, concerns how in the context of TCI and how we pursue our mission and how TARINA as a project endeavors to operationalize its goals, understand the dynamics needed to promote a nutrition-sensitive food system in India and actually more broadly, which brings me to my second context. The second context is broader, and this concerns how TCI as a whole has positioned itself strategically at the frontier of innovation, not just for work in India, but also for a broader agenda, for work that's evidence-based and aims at, around international development that takes place at the intersection of agriculture, food systems, and nutrition. And this actually is going back to a point which Prabhu mentioned at the outset, that the potential of scaling up the kind of work we do here. There really are broader implications for this work. Now to my talk with a focus on the effort to build and consolidate evidence using the work of TARINA as a point of reference. I would like to highlight three challenges to which TCI and TARINA have developed and implemented effective responses. So the first challenge concerns food system complexity and a TCI strategy. And here I'll just mention briefly how the work of TCI and TARINA in general, in particular, are sensitive to policy inputs and impacts. And this echoes much of what's already been said and evidenced in some of the talks. Secondly, I want to talk about the importance of policy-oriented partnerships. And for the second challenge, talk about food systems metrics and indicators for evidence. And here, talk about the multidimensional complexity of food systems, which was just noted. And then also when talking about food systems metrics, talk about how it's applied to various food system settings in our work. And then finally, talk about policy-relevant evidence, talk about how TCI works very closely on the problems of dissemination and direct engagement. First, to speak about food systems complexity and how the complexity of food systems can be modeled. Now, to make you feel either inspired or ill, I'll put up some graphics. So these are common graphics that one sees with food systems models, and they're often inspiring, they're generative, and what we find in a lot of these models, and I think the work we're doing within TCI is a departure from this kind of work, is it's graphically rich and empirically poor. And I think the work we're doing here is trying to take some of the basic principles of food systems complexity, such as thinking about vertical integration, cross-scale metrics from households to villages and to larger aggregates, and understanding how those are hierarchically related, and how the work is deeply contextually grounded. In the previous talk, you heard reference made to transect walks, and actually understanding what's going on at the village level to understand the dynamics of food systems. And of course, the work is policy sensitive. I'll make one more point here on the notion of vertical integration. A number of NGOs, donor groups, USAID in particular, has made a strong point about the importance of vertical integration, which means we understand what's going on at the level of soils, understanding what's going on in cropping practices, going up to harvesting, post-harvest food handling, all the way up to business enterprise solutions. And then finally to thinking about policy imperatives that go along with that. That work is that language and that logic is often more rhetorical than it is data-based. And TCI, I think proudly we can say we're actually making inroads in that. The work, we're able to do this work because of collaborative data collection planning in the inconvenient or the not so awkward moment waiting for Shub. The question was asked about collaborations, and that's a really important part of our work. So that's kind of the broad contours, thinking conceptually about how food systems complexity works. But for the work we do within TARINA is at the outset, there was a very well-developed conceptual model and a theory of change that drives the work, and it provides a logic for interventions, programming, really identifying indicators and metrics so that work becomes not just conceptually inspiring, but empirically tractable as well. And that leads us into thinking about evidence-based policies that can lead to nutrition-sensitive food systems and more affordable as well. So now getting down to the core of what we do, which is important for monitoring evaluation, thinking about food systems metrics. So how do we then take the complexity going from graphics, which are highly complex, thinking about specific indicators? We begin at the base, thinking about agroecological context, contemplating social mechanisms, as was referenced in Pael's talk, and which then leads into behavior change models, understanding household dynamics, both inter and intra-household, thinking about village and district level dynamics, and then the policy that affects those things, and working on a nutrition focus. Here I have a map, which you've seen the map of where we're collecting our data before, but this is by, very deliberately, sorry, a soil map, because we think about where what the soil composition is as a base condition. And we work from that level and come all the way up to the top, thinking about policy issues as well. Finally, my last challenge I'd like to think about is the policy relevant evidence. If you take some time and look at the TCI website, you'll see that there are fact sheets. There's a very deliberate effort to disseminate the work that's being done. There are focused policy briefs, and there's direct engagement. Most noticeably, and now an important historical footnote, in its inaugural event, TCI held a policy forum in New Delhi. It continues to hold joint policy forums, for instance, with IFPRI, and it's internationally engaged, doing work with the FAO and with other organizations as well. So, in my concluding comments, I'm going to make a few more points here and just pose some questions to talk about how we're responding to those. Why is the work of TCI oriented toward policy? Firstly, to better understand how policy has and can impact nutrition. Secondly, to identify and enable solutions that are scalable through policy mechanisms. Second question, what does TCI do to ensure a productive policy connection? Focus metrics, analytics, and evidence on policy. It forms and maintains vital partnerships. Thirdly, how is TCI working to institutionalize evidence-based policy through intensive and focused dissemination and direct engagement with policy audiences? In close, I'd like to reiterate how TCI and TARINA represent an innovative approach to generating evidence to help promote a more nutritious and affordable food system. And I'd also like to point out that the work that you've heard today from postdoctoral fellows, from graduate students, from undergraduates, TCI fellows, and associates are responding directly to this challenge and using their work to help build a better connection between the research evidence and the policy. And I'll conclude there. So thank you. Thanks.